I wrote the piece in 2019. It's been such a long time. I'm really excited to actually hear it in person.
Yes, it's going to be the world premiere of the piece, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How come Contemporary Insights found you? Did you know Zach and Michiko personally
No,
before they came to
I
Germany?
no, I think he actually found me through like Facebook or like some comment group or something like that. I honestly don't remember how it started, but I got an email from him and then we just started talking and do like a Skype meeting and then I was like, oh, it's really nice to have this opportunity to write like an ensemble piece. And then I was supposed to go in March 2020, but then something happened, right? So
Yes.
I couldn't go.
What happened? I didn't hear about it.
Yeah, right. It
Yeah.
was like the first week, I think, where everything was closing down. I was supposed to go to Germany, and
Mm.
I figured out that doesn't make sense for me to go. So yeah, it's been a long time.
And back then, the piece was already being written in March
Yeah,
2020.
I finished the piece I think in December 2019, so it's been
Oh,
quite a time for that piece. Yeah.
it's really frustrating when you write something and then you have to wait so long to listen to it, right? I can imagine.
I mean, it's gonna be an interesting experience because it's like younger Corie had certain things she wanted to do, but then I don't think I would do it the same way today, especially this piece and the subject I was interested into. I think because of the pandemic, it's not gonna be the same for me to explore that particular subject. But yeah.
Do you mean the subject of the piece itself?
Yeah, I was really interested into nostalgia and loneliness, which we
Hmm.
got a whole pandemic. So my whole relationship with loneliness really changed after this whole isolation, right? So I wouldn't write the same type of piece after living through the pandemic like that. But I just think it's interesting that I did that before all of this actually happened.
Yes. Yes, it is a really interesting. Could you explain it more what you mean by that the piece is about nostalgia and loneliness?
Yeah, I guess because I wrote the piece. I just finished my undergrad. I was like in a year of how do you call it? Not going to school, basically like a sabbatical, I guess. And I thought that was interesting to not be in school and not having like a kind of like a community of musicians in the background, always talking about music, and suddenly it's just like in real life having a work and then doing paperwork and then you have to find your creativity. So I thought it was interesting how I had to kind of separate me as a composer and me as a like a worker having to pay my rent, for example. And it just made composing even more clear to me that it's really a lonely job for most of part of it until you meet the performers, which is the most exciting part, right?
Hmm.
But I was really uh, thinking about it. And I mean, for me, nostalgia is like a really big thing. Also, I think it's an interesting physical reaction that we get. We don't totally understand. And I'm not talking about nostalgia in like the past tense of it, but rather the like the physical affect that we get when we have nostalgia, which is more in a kind of Proustien way of thinking about it, which is you don't you see something and then you don't know why, but you feel that deep nostalgia instead of reflecting of the past and then thinking about the past a certain way. I don't know if I'm making it that clear.
Well, I would say it's as clear as it can be, right? Because it's an
Yeah,
extremely complex thing to try and describe.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
mean, you wrote a piece of music with that in your mind. And if the words to describe it were sufficient, then you wouldn't have to have the music. So
Yeah,
yeah. So that's probably a good way to like a sort of a good introduction before one listens to the piece.
mm.
I'm really excited about it too. I saw a little bit of the score.
Hmm.
Um, it looks very, very challenging to play. So I'm also looking forward to watching the rehearsals if I'm allowed.
Mm.
And the thing that I really liked was the description you wrote on the beginning of the score. am I allowed to read it aloud?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah,
Okay,
totally.
so my French is horrible. I think you pronounce it moment intérieurs. Is it like that?
Yeah, Mama Intérieurs. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Moment intérieur is an interlude of daily lives that is looking at the different qualities linked to a particular type of tranquility resulting from isolation. It is a portrait of gray colors of walks on the edge of depth where sometimes bright contrasting colors arise. Can I dig into that a little bit?
Yes, please.
What could you try to describe to me what you mean by gray colors of walks on the edge of death?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was in my interest at the time. I just had written also a saxophone quartet that was exploring the color gray, um, and how different affect can come out of it, and also places that we usually don't think about it. But then so interesting, the pandemic happened, and all those places that I was super interested in to actually got the highlight for like a long time, and I was really not confused, but that was really surprising to me that all those spaces really came true again. Like if we think about just transportation, grocery stores, all of those places that we usually just transisted to were now really important at the beginning of this pandemic. But so I like to think about it in terms of textures and change of colors. So for me, the gray is also a question of matter. And I think at the title, you also have Parois and Crevasse. And I honestly can't find a way to translate it in English because there's like slight difference in French. So a parois would be something kind of a hole that's like more at the surface, and a crevasse would be something in the material that's a bit more sculpt, but also digging into the material. So there's slight difference, but it basically means the same thing.
Is it the word crevice?
Crevasse. Yeah, I guess it's the same thing in English. I'm not
Uh-huh.
entirely sure. I don't know if that's the right translation.
Yeah, I don't know either. But yeah, your description was good. Yeah. Um, yes. So, and what do you mean by an interlude of daily lives?
An interlude of daily lives. Yeah, I don't know. It for me it was all about those habits I had as a person and thinking about them in a way. I just always been interested in those small bits that we really do not look at it, but for me they're really beautiful, and I think that's what I meant by the daily lives in a part of this description actually.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm aware that that sort of question is really, really hard and sometimes very annoying because I also get that sort of question sometimes, and I think, well, if it were so easy to describe, then I would just do it like that. Then I wouldn't need a sort of poetic uh, language or music for that matter, or any sort of other expression other than just talking about it, right? But at the same time, I think it's interesting to try sometimes to try and describe those things, because sometimes you come to another perspective about them, and it can be enriching, I think. So please bear with me.
Absolutely. I for me it's also interesting to go back and see both the descriptions that I put on and also the music and see what I was trying to do. And I'm really excited to actually hear it and see how it actually unfolds in a performance, because now it's still quite abstract, right? Because I haven't been able to hear how it sounds, but um, and also having all that time away from it gives
Mm,
me a better perspective of what I was trying to do, rather than actually being in it and having that kind of small tunnel vision of I've just finished a piece, for example, and I wanted to do that. Like having some time where I was not looking at it really helps to kind of understand what was really important at the time for me.
yes, yes. Do you think your musical, the direction of your musical language, has it changed since then?
Oh
Or
yeah, a lot. There's a lot of thing in it that I think it's interesting because there's obvious winks at textures from Salvatore Sciarrino, and the reason for that is because for me he was such an important figure, um, and it still is, just more in a different way today. But at that time, it really did a big impression for me for many years. So there are obvious gestures that are kind of impressions of his personal musical style. Not with trying to kind of do something that's like Sciarrino. Of course, that doesn't make sense to do anything like that. So there's kind of a slightly um, underlying homage to him in this piece, which today I'm moving to do something that's much more different. In my interests are also different. So yeah, it's interesting to see that how much I've evolved over the last years musically.
does that have to do with because you are now living in New York and you're originally from Quebec?
Yeah,
Do you think that change of environment has influenced that change of direction?
I think so, but I also think I got access to other style of music that I think I didn't get access when I was just fresh out of undergrad. So I think there was much more interesting thing that I didn't know was happening that now I know are happening, which obviously changed my perspective on what music can be. And
May I
also,
ask what you mean by that? Like
sorry,
what thing? May I ask what exactly you mean by that?
I mean in musical styles or
Yes, you mean you said some new things that you weren't aware.
oh yeah, I like. I mean, just in general, like I think that the new music scene has a really interesting sound. But if you look just a bit on the border of it, there was all this thing happening. So I've been really interested in everything that's related to analog modular synthesizers. So that's really something I'm digging through. And
Mm.
I'm currently building my own modular synthesizer, which I think I would have been too shy to do back when I was at the conservatory in Montreal. Just because I didn't have the language to understand it, and now I have it. So I've been listening to a lot of recordings using those devices, for example. So that's for me one example of something that I knew, but I didn't really fully grasp how rich it can be. And also just being in the States, um, it's another country, it's another culture, right? So I'm part of the like French Canadian scene also, which is different from the Canadian scene. So
Yes.
you have the language that's obviously different, and the concerns are not the same. Also in the discussions we're having, um, so that I'm really happy to be here. I think I have access to so much support and so much richness in the field that I am right now, but especially through Colombia, I think I'm gaining a lot, which is absolutely different from what I actually got when I was at the conservatory in Montreal.
Hmm. Yes. Um, so speaking of another culture, you were born in Montreal. Montreal. My
Montreal and
pronunciation
Montreal
sounds.
works. Both of them
Yeah.
work.
Okay. And your native language is French, right? And most of your
Yes.
titles for your pieces are in French.
Yes.
Um, yes, I read on your biography at Columbia that you were striving to develop or to contribute to a new québécitude, and that really interested me. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so québécitude is a term that actually appeared first in the 70s, 80s in Quebec. So that term actually came from a minister that I'm forgetting. But at that time, there was an interest in having independence from Canada, actually. So there was a growing
Mhm.
movement to actually be Quebec having its own jurisdiction and also just being totally independent. So that was a big part of the history of Quebec. So the first time they actually used that term, they were trying to define what it means to be a Quebec person. And what's interesting is at that time it was extremely inclusive, which now, when we look at this term in the current politics, for example, it's not what it used to be. It's very restrictive and very conservative in the way we're using it. So what I mean by a québécitude is, because I'm a proud Montreal person, I'm a proud Quebec person because I was born there, I speak the language, and I miss Montreal a lot when I'm here. I miss speaking French, and just the culture is completely different. But for me, the use of québécitude is just a way to look at a perspective of cultural, social, gender, and race that for me enables the creative tools that I need in order to do music, because it is the territory I'm from. So it helps me to understand better who I am. And I think that's also my political intention, in a way, to kind of forge a new understanding of what a québécitude means, because we're at that point, and I think we need it. And I think for me to do it with art is the best way to actually be able to embrace that term.
Yes. Okay. That's really interesting to me. There are a bunch of things there that I would really like to ask more in
Mm-hmm.
depth. The first that comes to my head is, you mentioned in the 70s, where this term was first introduced, or first started to be used, that it was back then more inclusive than it is now.
Yeah.
So is it for you a sort of a return to a past better definition of it, like a sort of renaissance, or is it also an expansion of that?
I think it's more an expansion. I think inclusivity meant for certain people and not everyone. So if we think, for example, the First Nation in Canada, I don't think they were taken in account in that definition. But for example, immigrants would be taken in account. And French immigrant that would move to Quebec, they were kind of part of the society. They would share, and then they would also be able to kind of adapt to Quebec. I think the problem right now is it's only about adaptation. So that's, for me, not the right way to do it. I think also inclusivity as a kind of route that for me doesn't entirely work. I just think my generation is ready to move on, and the older generation is not. They want to have a certain idea what it means to be a Quebec. They're really scared to actually lose everything that they've been working on with the French language and with the kind of cultural um, icons. I just think we're able to do more. So I'm just hoping that we kind of move forward and we understand that the term is much more flexible than it actually is. And I think it's pretty much happening in a lot of places, right? I think we're kind of able to understand that we're melting more and more, and that the barriers are kind of blurry. As
Yeah.
a sort of creolisation of things happening, and that is scary for a lot of people. But it's something natural that's been happening for centuries. I just think it's interesting that right now people are freaking out about it.
Yes. Yes. Okay. That's I swear this is my last annoying question, but do you how do I phrase it? How do you think being a composer, or making music, or making art, should relate to that, to those sorts of questions? Or, I mean, you obviously do think that it should, and so most composers do think that, but how are you interested in making music that is, or that has an explicit political purpose? Or do you think, how does one go about that?
Yeah, that's actually a difficult question, because I
It's
think
extremely
sometimes,
difficult. That's why
yeah,
I
yeah,
touched it.
that's okay. I think it's an interesting question that a lot of composers actually need to ask themselves before doing anything political. I don't think it's political because it's me also. So I'm biracial, meaning my mom is from Montreal and my dad is from Guinea. So I have this history where I'm not in any easy line. So people makes it that I have to fight for one or another way and kind of choose which side I want to be. And I'm at a point of my life where I'm both without having to they're kind of cohabiting together in a weird way that I think people who don't have this experience are very unfamiliar with it. So for me, it's just a way to just bring new perspectives that I think are necessary, and I think they turn out to be political because I think music is a political act in itself, right? Like art for art is honestly just a lie. I mean, doing music is a form of communication, a form of community, whatever you want to think about it or not. You have an audience and then you have a performer. There is communication happening, so that's a community. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's important to talk about those things. And I don't think my music is explicitly this way. I think sonically there are some elements that actually resonate. Like I'm a collage person. I like to have different sounds, and
Mhm.
then sounds for me don't have to blend and just follow a kind of linear path in a way that you think so. And I think you can actually hear it in my music a lot.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Um, I would really like to have that conversation for hours and hours because it's an infinitely interesting theme. I had a sort of a similar conversation with Wieland Hoban, who you
Mm,
probably met already, and the other composer that's featured in the concert. His piece has also, I mean, your piece doesn't have that directly, but it is something you think about in your identity as a whole as a composer. His piece has directly a political theme. So this is something I'm really interested in. Um, Unfortunately, uh, we shouldn't go on for much longer. So we're going to have to postpone this discussion for when you are here in Germany for the concert.
mm, mm.
Um, yes, I'm really excited about it, about your piece, and we'll see each other soon then.
I'm really looking forward to it. So thanks for having me today.
Yes, thank you for talking with me.